Not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
The Light is Britain's far-right conspiracy theory paper spreading hate and vicious lies. No, that's what the BBC say. The Light is the only national newspaper bringing you the real news and informed opinion on what's really going on today. You can subscribe, order copies, submit articles, and read back issues on our website, thelightpaper.co.uk, and see for yourself why the establishment are so worried about the uncensored truth getting out to people every month. The Light Paper. Not far right, just right so far. thelightpaper.co.uk.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
What is Australia's deadliest predator? The one that hits with more than 30 Gs of force. Strikes in under a second. Leaves catastrophic injury in its wake. You won't hear it, you won't see it, not until it's too late. Australia's deadliest predator isn't found in the wild. It's on our roads. Speeding is the killer.
The earlier cancer is found, the better our chances of treating it.
Lung cancer screening is available for people with a smoking history. To find out if you're eligible for a free scan,
see a doctor or a health professional.
It could save your life.
I want to be the best dad that I can be.
I will be her biggest fan.
I want to be his superhero.
I love being connected to my kids.
She means the world to me.
I'm looking forward to this game, mate. It's going to be so much fun.
I love being his dad and his best mate.
She is very special to me.
With the latest information and analysis of major events from around the world, this is today's News Talk, The World Today.
COVID has affected each and every one of us, but now we have a shot to get our lives back to normal.
This is our shot to look out for each other.
To explore the world again.
To welcome friends back to our shores.
To keep businesses open.
Our shot to say goodbye to quarantine.
And do everything we possibly can to get out of lockdown.
I've had my shot.
This is my shot.
This is my shot. Come on, Australia, let's get the job done. Start a conversation with your doctor about your shot.
Well, back when our borders shut, Chris was quick to do what he thought was the right thing to protect himself and his nearest and dearest.
This is our shot to look out for each other.
Keep healthy and safe.
And to bring Australians home.
To end lockdowns once and for all. This is my shot.
This is my shot.
This... Start a conversation with your doctor about your shot.
He got the jab, which he says destroyed his life.
Mm-hmm. All our hopes are riding on a vaccine. Yes. You need to be quiet.
He got the jab, which he says destroyed his life. For that, he received the biggest ever COVID payout, more than $6 million. But it comes with a sting.
There's hundreds of billions of dollars spent in government stimulus. All our hopes are riding on a vaccine.
Yes.
You need to be quiet.
He got the jab, which he says destroyed his life.
All our hopes are riding on a vaccine.
Yes.
You need to be quiet.
Kathleen loves flowers, so much so she became a florist. To keep her shop open during COVID, she got the jab, but the side effects are devastating.
This is my shot.
13 surgeries later, she can never work again.
All our hopes are riding on a vaccine.
Yes.
You need to be quiet.
13 surgeries later, she can never work again.
Well, if you don't want to listen to our most senior qualified
I am
immunologists
listening
in
to
this
them,
country,
and I
well,
think
you're-
you need
well,
to
you're not.
start listening
You
to our
just- you
scientists
just said- you
and
just
our
said-
doctors,
well,
Craig.
our scientist is our most senior qualified immunologist in this country,
Okay,
Professor
Craig.
Robert Clancy, and you are not listening to him. I'm sorry.
No worries, Craig. You're in a position of responsibility, and I think you're failing in that
And
duty.
I'll continue to speak the truth and tell the truth.
It'd be
And the
nice
media
if you
wanna-
started,
If the
that would
media
be
want to
great. Thank you.
misrepresent my position, I'm going to come on and I'm going to defend it.
We
because-
still haven't got an answer.
I would like to take my medical advice from someone who is knowledgeable in infectious diseases, is an epidemiologist.
Well, that's right. Well, you should
It's
listen.
one
In that
example
case, in
of
that
many
case, you should
theories you-
listen to Professor Robert Clancy. He's our most senior credentialed immunologist in this country. So that's who I believe we should be listening to.
Look,
and he has said, I'll quote exactly what he's wrote.
You've already quoted it, Craig.
Well, no, I haven't. He also said here, this is very important. He said, from uncertain beginnings, an impressive database has more recently been accumulated that strongly supports the use of hydroxychloroquine and or ivermectin. Their use in concert with the vaccine, so this is not an anti-vax position, their use in concert with the vaccines can no longer be denied. In fact, this is the only science-based opinion. Now, they're not my words.
Ivermectin,
That's
Craig
not.
Kelly,
That's not my.
Craig
That's
Kelly,
not. Hang on, that's not my
ivermectin,
words. That's not my
that study
theories.
you're referring to.
That is, no, I'm not,
Listen, no,
I
that
am-
study
what
you're
I'm
referring to,
no, I'm
because
not
this is
referring to any
important.
study. You are misrepresenting what I'm saying. What I just quoted
I
there-
did my research,
hang on,
Craig,
and
as
what
you
I just
asked us to
quoted
do.
there are the
You need to
words of
listen for a
Australia's-
moment.
But hang on, let me quote, because you're
Ivermectin
saying
is a
things that are
wonderful
incorrect.
drug. You are right. If you have scabies or
Oh,
river
look,
blindness.
you obviously haven't read. I'm sorry, you are not listening to our. You've got to listen to the science. You've got to listen to.
Are
our
you a
most
scientist?
senior
Are you a
qualified-
scientist, Craig? I'm
No,
not.
I am.
I'm not.
I have just quoted the senior immunologist in this country, the most highest credentialed immunologist in this country. Now, are you saying that he's wrong?
I'm saying the chief
No,
medical
no,
officer.
no. Well, are
Every
you saying-
global
are you
medical
saying-
body in the
No,
world
that's not
has
correct.
rejected the
I'm
use
sorry.
of those
I'm
two
sorry, that is
drugs,
incorrect.
Craig.
That is incorrect.
But you know
That
what?
is-
I
that is
actually didn't want to
100%
get you on
incorrect.
here
You've got
to
India, you
determine
have
whether or
countries
not
like
what you're saying
India,
is true
the
or
medical
not.
bod-
But you know
that
what?
is-
I
that is
actually didn't want to
100%
get you on
incorrect.
here
You've got
to
India, you
determine
have
whether or
countries
not
like
what you're saying
India,
is true
the
or
medical
not.
bod- but you are, I'm sorry, with greatest respect, you are making false statements that you are accusing me of, and I have a right to defend them.
You know what?
You
Freedom
said
of
that
speech is
everybody
one
in the
thing,
world-
Craig.
You said that everybody in the world, and that is simply untrue. The medical bodies in India use ivermectin. They have it in their standard protocol.
Craig.
I've seen a study recently published, a peer-reviewed study in the American Journal of Medicine that has a treatment protocol that includes both hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. So to say that there's no medical body in the world that approves this, I'm sorry, is incorrect.
Craig, what's going on at the moment?
We
Because
still haven't got an answer.
There you are. I find that one of the most incredible pieces of video I've seen for a long time, and it brings back some absolutely horrible images of what happened during COVID. And I don't think most of us who were involved in that will get over it. I think the way people treated their fellow citizens, Australians to Australians, New Zealanders to New Zealanders, and who forget about the borders, anybody to anybody that didn't take that jab. It's safe and effective, and it's not. Most of us still have serious questions, and by the way, welcome to the Protagonists. Serious questions about how the Covid-19 disaster evolved and slammed into it just like a global tsunami of ugliness and murder and death. But none of us can get away from the conclusion that it would not have happened without the absolute collusion of mainstream media. While millions passed away or are just injured by the shot and suffer, they have eternal suffering from the circumstances forced upon them during the so-called pandemic. Look at Melbourne. the biggest lockdown city in the world. None of those responsible for the disaster have borne any responsibility. In fact, they get gongs. Yes, you did a great job in COVID. Only 4,000 died on your watch. Almond. Absolute bullshit, isn't it? And I apologise for this, but I think it was the tip of the iceberg for what is going to happen. In fact, most, if not all, have gone on to bigger and better things. Look at them. They got, I want a job with Pfizer. Oh, yeah. How many did you kill? Oh, a couple of dozen. Beauty. It's terrible. I'm laughing, not because it's funny, because it's probably true. Now, while we mull about just what to do to bring to the attention to the masses what happened and what must not happen again, and they keep trying. Oh, there's a new virus out there. Will it kill you quickly? Probably. Great. And many still strive, by the way, to obtain compensation for victims. Do any of us really believe a few apologies from celebrities in the mainstream media is sufficient to help the victims or assure us this will never happen again? Some do. Ostrich syndrome. True, we should not be preoccupied with retribution. Retribution. I think I am a little bit. But we must shed our rose-coloured glasses, nose-coloured glasses, sitting on the nose, and stop regarding mainstream media or anyone in the media as our salvation. I see on independent media in Australia, I'm going to save you. I'm going to save Australia. I'm going to save New Zealand. I'm going to save the world. I'm going to save the UK. They just want the publicity. They want to be lauded upon as the great saviour of humanity. And yeah, publicity helps, but those connected to the mainstream media cannot possibly assist in this fight and in the legacy and also independent media. Question is it independent? As time goes on, we see it's not. We know that Big Pharma paid certain individuals to round up the independent media mob and pay them X amount of dollars and slowly twisting the knife in the back to stop them from talking about what they wanted covered up in the first place. And I know that from first-hand knowledge. There must be other ways. Now, we'll find out. We're going to refer to Carl Stefanovic, the Joe Rogan of Australian podcasters. God, I think we got better than that. So our panel is today Stephen Tripp, President, Australians for Better Governance, and Vice President, Let's Rethink Renewables, Ali Cook, a New Zealand publicist, tool manager and promoter, and Jason, my old mate Jason, Australian political commentator, independent media host, and ex-T&T Radio. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Nice to be on.
Now, Jason, I have to ask you this first of all. What's your thoughts on, because you saw the background, and you see we have thrown on a head of Ali and a head of, which is large ones because of their egos, of Carl. What's your thoughts on Carl? I deeply regret misleading the Australian public. I deeply regret taking all that money, trying to save my job, and telling porky after porky after porky, did you fall off the cliff? Did you follow the other sheep? That's the guy we're talking about. What's your thoughts on Carl Stefanovic and people to say that he's, I don't know whether it's a truism or not, to be the Joe Rogan of Australian podcasters, but Joe Rogan in many ways have sold his soul too. And look at Carl. I mean, what's your thoughts on Carl and Ali having their great moments of, I'm sorry?
Well, I have two distinct views between Carl and Ali, and I don't put them on the same level. I have a distinct dislike for Ali Langdon and that interview with Craig Kelly. That really cut to the bone all those years ago, watching her try and drown Craig out, despite the fact that he was quoting Professor Robert Clancy, someone who we would often refer to amongst many others. Now, the Carl story, I take a different position, and represented by my background today for my upcoming book, Merge or Die, it's going to give you a different perspective. Now, first of all, to declare, well, out in the open, I worked with Carl about 30 years ago before he moved to Channel 10. He was brought over from New Zealand by my old boss, Mike Latin, at the movie network for Optus Vision. I got to work with him and we had a lot of fun together, and he was pretty much what you see is what you get. I'm also reminded that Jackson Warne said on the Two Worlds Collide podcast that he believed his father was taken out by the jabs, and Shane Warne and Carl Stefanovic were very good mates. So I know that Carl has moved his position from a genuine perspective, unlike others that may argue that it's purely monetarily. So I take that as a gain. I also take his interview with Pete Evans that was shared on X as a gain, and the red pilling that he seems to be going on. So I take that as a gain. The fact that he came to this side of the fence and entered the market, some argue or would argue that that means that perhaps he's walking over the independent media and squashing them. But what he's showing us is literally how microscopic many of us are in that space compared to someone who certainly talks to a lot more people than us and earns about $200,000 a month, which is probably a lot more than we all earned over the last 6 years by comparison. So putting that together, on the balance, I'm grateful that he's come across without any coercion as such. I know that people are skeptical, but I have watched a number of the interviews, and I did watch the one that he did with Jared Rennick and then with Jared and Alex Antic, and he did call for the parties to merge and to stop fighting amongst each other. So whilst you may argue that there can be some certain self-interest or some self-preservation, his contract at Channel 9 is up in December. He's signed a deal to host a radio show with Eddie Maguire on a weekend. This podcast is largely, if not totally, self-funded, and it's not exactly a Joe Rogan podcast yet. And Joe Rogan, for the most part, got Trump re-elected, or at least helped in doing that stuff, and then he sort of teeters on either side. But he is only Joe Rogan. He calls himself the clown or the jester or the fool, and Carl himself admits that he doesn't know as much than others otherwise would. But look, that just paints a picture from where I'm coming from. So I'm not prepared to call for his head or a pound of flesh or anything like that. I do want to talk to him. I don't necessarily line up to interview him on the subject, but I would like to speak to him one way or another, whether it's the upcoming book or something like that, to gain a perspective. But on mine, he gets the benefit of the doubt, not saying that he doesn't deserve to be handled one way or another. There are plenty of people calling for his head, and they can certainly make their arguments. But that's me, and that's a very gentle approach. But I'm hoping that Ali and Stephen are going to rip the gloves off and go the hardest and show me where I'm wrong.
Well, I can tell you're wrong in the first place. So I don't mean to be rude to you, Jason, but you are entirely wrong. You have, and I think I'll talk to Ali in a sec in regards to what networks do. Now, to be funded privately, I highly doubt that, by the way, because he's zipping all over the country with a crew, producers, cameramen, all that sort of stuff, makeup, all that sort of stuff. That is done by networks. And I understand why they do it, because they want it to look really good. The reason why this is happening, if you look what happened to Piers Morgan in the UK when they let him go, I think it was with Talk TV at the end, and they let him go. But they encouraged him to go online because you can eventually look after yourself. So we have, and he's changed his tack too from when he was at Talk TV and the other networks before that. So if you look at what Carl's doing, Carl's just ready to move sideways. But I have no doubt that the strings are still being pulled by those at Nine and his close associates. And as for moving into another area, I mean, it's like saying, well, you only killed 48,000 people to a murderer, but we'd really like you and we're glad that you're sorry. Too late, in my opinion, too late for Carl Stefanovic. It's absolutely too late. And as for Ali, the same thing. Oh, I'm really sorry, really sorry. Too late. It's just called backtracking, backpedaling. And I think networks have a great part to play here. But you wait till the next thing that happens. And by the way, just going back to Carl, he sold his soul out because of the COVID fiat, or the terrible things that were happening. He sold his soul out, just like many doctors did, to make sure he got paid to tell us bullshit that ultimately hurt people health-wise and up in the between the ears wise. He helped them, and so therefore you're saying I found the light. I'm moving over now to my own podcast. He hasn't changed his tune. All he's doing is doing a different tact of it, but still paid by Nine, still pushed. He'll move again to another tact soon down the track, Jason. So I don't believe Carl at all is sincere. I think Carl is doing what they do in the media, and if he's being handled at all by any network, they're going to say, you need to move sideways. We're going to cut back your hours on maybe for the morning show. It may not happen, who knows, but at least you have another way of getting our word out, even though it's only nudging, it's slowly pushing through the mist of shit. That's what it is. So therefore, I think I don't think Carl is doing this because I'm sorry, and I've seen the light. I'm going to be the great saviour. I think it's debacle, and anybody that says that they're going to save the world and I'm sorry for what I did and all bullshit. That's what I think. And as for Ali, I mean, the way she treated Kelly then was just appalling. Ali, on Karl Stefanovic, I don't know if you know who or watch much of him in being in.
I do. I've actually watched all the episodes, so I'm watching it carefully because, for me, it's in New Zealand we've had 4 major television hosts that have stepped out at various times that have either been fired because they did the wrong thing, like right close in the narrative, or have walked away and started their own thing. So we've got equivalents of him in New Zealand, if you like. And I guess I have every reason to not forgive, because I actually have an mRNA vaccine injured son who was convinced by their propaganda and the mandates, because he was going to lose his job, and he took one jab which put him in an ambulance 4 hours later, and he's been in ED maybe 14 times since then in the last 4 years. It's taken away the health of my 20-somethings, the latter half of his 20s. The health has been taken away. He still has ongoing pericarditis. So I have every reason to be angry at people like that, but because I work in the media, I realise that the power is the people like the producers, the heads of the networks. They're the people who call the shots. And so I guess those people like the Karl Stefanovics of the world are like the doctors who are deciding whether they should diagnose that vaccine injured person, or whether they should say they've got anxiety and shoo them off out the door really quickly, rather than be deemed as a doctor who diagnosed someone as vaccine injured, because that was a big thing here. I saw him apologise, and I don't know, it's hard to say whether that's real because I don't know him personally, but it's interesting. I did an interview yesterday with Duncan Garner, editor-in-chief, who's one of those ex-television people just like Karl is, and he's starting to dip a toe. He's got a political broadcast that's going quite well, a podcast, and yesterday having me on was dipping a toe for him. And it was interesting to see now in 2023, he tried dipping a toe by interviewing Aseem Malhotra, but he'd just only come out of mainstream when he did that, and he got slaughtered online for interviewing Aseem Malhotra, the cardiologist from England. So he hadn't had another go at talking to a freedom movement person until yesterday. So I'm trying to actually encourage those that I know that have come out of mainstream media to be brave up. And no matter what you said in the past, actually, I think our social fabric is ripped. It's ripped because of what people watched on mainstream media and the fear that was pumped into them. I'm all about how do we repair the rips in the social fabric? How do we repair the people who no longer speak to their friends anymore, who no longer speak to family members because they ostracised people because of their vaccine choice. And I'm not vaccinated myself. I had other musicians remove bodies of work from Spotify because they didn't want to be associated with me. So I've suffered that for standing up, and suffered because I've got a kid that's vaccine injured. But I guess the question is, if they're stepping away from mainstream media and their apology is genuine, or they're trying to give a genuine apology, should we leave the door open because they have the power to convince more people to just wake up to what's going on? So that's my kind of thoughts on that. I'm not forming an opinion either way as to whether it's genuine, but I do like to see them actually come out, because I do know they're the same people that influenced people like my son to get vaccinated, and they had pressure on them as well. So I had a good conversation with that yesterday with Duncan before I went on, a good 40 minutes before we went into the recording, about the sort of pressure he was under from producers if he so much as said the wrong thing that was against the narrative.
Just before I move into Stephen, Ali, if a podcaster has an entourage, which if you look at normal corporate media, they do have that. They have producers and makeup and cameramen and all sorts of, they have at times grips and all that. That is a pure network production, because you really can't afford it, because you've got to pay wages, and then there's the logistics of travel. So I have great doubt. I got
one thought on that, actually, because what's happened with Duncan Garner, and I don't know if that's the case with Karl Stefanovic, is he's actually technically sort of still connected to the mainstream, because he's on a platform called Rover, which allows independent podcasts, but it's owned by mainstream media. So I wonder if there's a slight connection in there still, or is he using his own money because he's been on very good salary for a long time? So that's another way you could look at that. So it could be a connection still.
But Carl's he's no different than, truly, and I'm not. I don't think we should be. I think Carl is Carl, looking after Carl, and it's Jason did mention previously that he's got a weekend gig at a radio station, and then he's going to, he may lose his gig at Channel 9, but he'll at least be doing weekends, but his pay packet gets chopped in, here and there. So he looks at other revenue streams, and that being radio. Maybe he might do some newspaper stuff, and also his podcast. But why didn't he do it earlier if he was so sincere? He's had a few years to go and do that. Oh, no, I'm being paid. And why the apology that took so long? Oh, it's because I haven't got a gig coming up, if Jason is right, and I need to spread myself across all platforms. Maybe that's the case. What do you think, Stephen? Do you think, or am I being a bit unfair? But by the way, he's doing he'll be doing exactly the same as 99.9% of others who are in that industry, because you need to eat. But at the same time, if he was sincere, he would have done it earlier. And so would have Ali done it earlier. And I think their true colours are shown. If you look at doctors, a lot of doctors, they went out and they just kept jabbing to their heart's content, knowing full well that they're going to hurt and probably kill people. They still did it. And some good doctors said, no, I'm not going to do it. I know a whole bunch of them. They said, no, we are not going to do that. It is wrong. And that's where commentators and those that influence the way a nation sways, they have to be a lot stronger and not just be receivers of bags of gold. Stephen, what do you think?
Look, whenever I watch stuff from COVID, the first thing is, I think we're all still traumatized to a point, especially people like myself that lost their job. But there's two words that really scream out to me, and that one is authenticity, and the other one is accountability. And we haven't seen enough accountability from anyone. We've been focused politically, mainly in the streams that I speak in, but maybe we need to start asking for accountability from our journalists as well, because that's what Ali Langland was doing to Craig Kelly. She was trying to say to him, look, we're going to place you, we're going to put accountability on you because you're a member of Parliament pushing these views. When you look back at it, he was right. she was wrong. So where's the accountability on her for pushing those views? I suspect there's not going to be any accountability. Where's the accountability on the health advice that they kept telling us that they were taking advisement under? Like premiers would stand up there 11 o'clock every morning scaring the wits out of everyone, and what would they say every single day? We're taking the health advice. Every decision we make is based on the health advice. Well, how come we've never seen that health advice? That should be transparent. That should be out there. We should be able to read it. What was it written down somewhere? Was it whispered into someone's ear? Was it written out down on a napkin? We don't know. Where was the health advice coming from? So we need to have accountability, one, on our politicians, but I guess we should have accountability on our media as well. And look, everyone's human. People make mistakes. Everyone. Whether you took the vaccine or whether you didn't take the vaccine or whether you had a stance or whether you didn't have a stance, none of us really knew in the heat of the moment how this was all going to pan out. So we're all humans. It's human nature. We make mistakes. I don't mind people making mistakes. And, you know, we have a radio host here in Sydney, Chris Smith. He came out many years ago and apologised and said, look, I'm sorry for pushing the vaccine. I was under the wrong advice. So, there's an example of someone coming out many years ago. It's taken Karl Stefanovic a lot longer. But they're all humans. Yes, they make mistakes, but I think we definitely need to hold their feet to the fire. But there definitely needs to be accountability for, yes, in a big way, our politicians, but also our media, because the media is meant to be holding the politicians to account, but who's holding the media to account? And I think what is happening, what we're seeing right now, is the other word, authenticity. People are moving away from mainstream media and they're moving away from the major political parties. And we're seeing the rise of One Nation and some of the other, it's really just One Nation at the moment, but it might play out that there's other parties that pop up as well, because people are just sick of the narrative. They're sick of the spin. They can see it. They've been exposed to it now so often, and they're looking for people that speak out and try and tell the truth. Like Craig Kelly, was he right on everything? Well, I think he was right on most things. But if there's been a person that has paid the price for his convictions, it's been Craig Kelly, because he's gone from being in Parliament to not being in Parliament. But we definitely need accountability. I think there needs to be more focused on authenticity. And look, people make mistakes, but they have to own those mistakes.
I have to ask you, Steve, or not ask you, I've got to mention that Chris Smith, when he came out and said that the jabs are wrong, COVID, misconception, blah, 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 he did that on my network, TNT Radio.
Yeah.
And we insisted he do that. And he did it willingly, because we find so many lumps of evidence, so many great doctors like Peter McCullough and all those, they would come on and talk about it. We would have those that are injured, vaccine injured. And because we were 24/7, we had an archive and a supply of new information that no one else had on the planet. So Chris Smith did come out, and he of late he hasn't acknowledged that, but he did come out and tell everybody that he made a mistake on TNT Radio, not anywhere else. And then he's on 2GB at the moment, doing a great job, but he came out again. So I don't know what the hell was happening. I don't mean coming out, because look at me, he came out and said, the COVID, it was wrong. I've now admit that it was wrong. Well, he did that 3 years before with us.
Yeah.
And Jason probably remembers that too. Jason, we should expect more from legacy media. And Carl, I'm sorry, I should have done better. Please help me, let me go to heaven. But Carl, he's no different, is he, than most other mainstream media operatives. If they buck the system, now there's a reason why they won't, but if they buck the system, they'd get fired, because you have a directive from upstairs, and the directive says you must promote this. You must promote this not because of a moral obligation, it's because of a financial obligation, not only to yourself, but the federal government, Jason, in these days and those days, and now, they were keeping radio and TV and newspapers, TV stations and newspapers, they were keeping them afloat, because you couldn't advertise because we're all locked down. Come, big sale on. Oh, really? How am I going to get there? So they relied on the donations from the government, who would keep pumping out this propaganda. And we had these hosts who would do it from home, on many occasions, because of COVID was going to jump out from the bush and bite them on the arse, they would do that and they would do this stuff, but they were still pushing the company line, Jason. And so shouldn't we expect more from mainstream media or legacy media? Shouldn't we expect more from independent media? But do you think that will ever change?
Yeah, it's a great question, because the reality is that money talks, and it's what keeps us all afloat. Let's think back to the very beginning of COVID, where all the commercial stations were granted the amount equivalent to what their licensing fee was. So it was in the tens of millions of dollars. That was the first component. So therefore, you knew that the TV stations themselves were going to toe the government line, because they were literally gifted that amount of money, which no one else got to do. Now, Carl did come out in one of his shows, whether it was the podcast or on the Today Show, and said, no one ever told me ever at Channel 9 what I could, over editorial control, what I could or couldn't say, apart from a McDonald's campaign where they said, just go a little bit easier on the Maccas. Now, he said that, whether he said that tongue-in-cheek or not, the fact is, he said it, and that's a question that you would certainly hold him to account if you asked him that question.
But Jason, I've worked in major market radio stations and all over the world. And when they tell you, when you have got one income, government, when they say you must not upset the advertiser, whatever you do. So Carl, no one told me what to say. That's absolute crap. And you know that when you go to a show, and Vic and Ali will vouch for that, when you go to a show, you got a run sheet that says, talk about that. Your producers want you to do that. You got to do that, stand on your head and do a twist. So, so Jason, I think what Carl said was absolute crap.
Now, we can agree that he said it, and we can agree that we'd like to test it. That's the first component. The second component I want to say is he also said after taking 3 jabs that he regretted taking 3 jabs and would not be taking any more, which went against the company line. I remember him saying that. So I'll just park that there. But the point I wanted to make was that when you look at Craig Kelly's political career, it evaporated. As the leader of the UAP, he got 7% in the seat of Hughes, despite holding the seat for the Liberal Party previously. Now, that was after Clive's outspent everyone for the UAP on that campaign, and his vote went down 80%. That's the first one. Now, the second one is Gerard Rennick's political career evaporated as well, forcing him out, setting up the People First Party to get 2/3 of Malcolm Roberts' vote in the Senate, evaporated. Now, we all admired Craig and Gerard for being the Mr. Smiths in the world. And then, of course, from Victoria, there was Russell Broadbent. Now, Russell, 74 years of age when he reached the end of his term, ran as an independent, and he saw his seat evaporate. So Alex Antic didn't do any of that, and Alex Antic is back in Parliament in the Liberal Party. So the argument for self-preservation and not just income is a big one. These are points that, are you better? The question is, when I was in the Labor Party, for goodness sake, in 2005, and had a whole lot of drama within that party and the way things were playing out, and the corruption, etc. And my branch president, Alex, and I'll never forget what he said, Jason, fight from within, don't fight from without. You can do more within the party and the organisation than you can do from the outside. Well, that only went so long, and 3 years later I left because of something that was horrific, and I didn't want any part of it to do with the dumping of Nathan Rees and the whole story behind that. Now, that's a whole other lifetime. That's many, many years ago. So it's a big difference. Now, I just want to make one more comment, because all the lunatics that are out there, and I'm going to name this guy, Silvertail 1947 in the comments, telling me that I'm kissing the Zio ring, for goodness sake. I'm just like everyone else on bended knee. Now, let's just stop right there with the absolute garbage that's going on there. So apparently, if you want to merge the parties together and debate people, you are some form of Jewish something or other that therefore has to be excluded from the race. So Silvertail, go over to Iran, mate, and go fight the war that you're going to fight, because somehow anyone who's trying to bring people together is the bad guy in all of this, and we've all got to sit there out on our anonymous wings in the middle of nowhere and fight like lunatics screaming at the clouds, to quote Gerard Rennick. There's got to be another way where we can bring people together. And as Stephen said, One Nation's the one now that's got a massive following, 35% first preference, not enough to win government in its its own right, will probably win 50 plus seats. Who in One Nation is qualified to take on the two oppositions parties of Labor and the Liberal National Coalition if and when they become the true opposition? How are they going to debate? They need the Craig Kellys of the world in that party. They need the Russell Broadbents. They need the Gerard Rennicks, and they need a new fresh blood of people who've done the hard yards, who are going to be able to hold their own within a system. And poor old Craig, who got trounced in that interview and never, ever, ever gave up, but when he ran for the Libertarians got less than 1% vote, basically anonymous at this point. And had he stayed with One Nation, which he couldn't at the time, he probably would have been elected senator for New South Wales in the 2025 election and could have been back in the parliament. And there we go.
Yeah, Craig Kelly is one of those people who actually put his neck on the line, and I have a great admiration for Craig Kelly. We had many hiccups trying to connect him in his car, though. But he's a magnificent person, and the way Ali Langdon spoke to Craig, will you shut up and just listen and basically piss off? I think that was just disgusting. Ali, networks aren't going to change, are they? And when Carl says that no one tells him what to say, that is an outright porky, because in the contract somewhere, if the contract says stand on your head and swivel, you'll do that. And the money he got, I think it's a couple of million a year, at least. They're not going to say, oh, you go out there and say what you like, especially when you have advertisers that are very sensitive. And at the COVID time, there were no advertisers, and the only advertiser was the government, who were paying the TV and radio stations to stay on air. So you can't upset them. Do you think mainstream media or legacy media, and now independent media, a lot of those have drunk the Kool-Aid, do you think that it will ever change, or do you think that we're going to get worse and worse? And Jason mentions which we won't talk about because we're here all night, talked about the Iran thing. As with COVID, as with the war between Russia and Ukraine, as with the war with Israel and Gaza, you have a thing called information operation. The information operation is working well over time. But just in reply to you, Jason, in a war, it's highly unusual that the one that loses it comes out stronger. And that's what we seem to be seeing at the moment with Iran. And as for starting it, I mean, in a contract, looking for peace in a contract, you have to have that trust with one another. The trust is obviously not there from Iran's point of view, because they've been bombed many, many times from the US. And if you look at the chap, I can't think of his name right now, the guy from the leader of Hamas, he was invited over to Iran, and remember his bunker or his house was blown up. Well, that was a joint operation between Iran, Israel, and the US. They all knew what was happening, and they invited this poor bugger to, you stay on the house on the outskirts, really nice place. And he got annihilated. So no, the information operation is working overtime, Jason. As for networks, Ali, networks will never change. They and rightly so, they have the bottom line to worry about, don't they?
They do have the bottom line to worry about, but I think there's sort of two prongs. There's the people that are running the networks, but then there's also the journalism schools and the type of journalists that are being turned out. Now, at the moment, I'm hovering over the top of a target where ministers decided to remove, or someone requested to remove myocarditis information, safety information for 12 to 15-year-olds in New Zealand. And I've been gathering OIAs, and this is what I went on with Duncan Garner with the other day. And I said to Duncan, in the old days, I would have brought a story that was like a scoop, and they would have been clambering over each other going, don't let anyone, we're going to publish that at 3 o'clock, don't give it to anyone else until we've published. They sort of knew what a scoop was. Now we were talking about education inside journalism schools. Now they're teaching these journalists, that their job is to educate the public. And you could see that in Ali, Carl Stefanovic's, partner there that was going after the politician. She wasn't listening for another side of the story. the Fourth Estate's job is to investigate and to take both sides of a story. And when they get a scoop, to get excited about that scoop and jump on it. And because they're being taught at the schools, your job is not to get both sides of the story and to give balance. They're being taught that your job is to educate the public. So I see a lot of the young journalists now just don't have the want for a scoop. That's gone, and it's how they're being taught at journalism school. They're actually churning out these little narrative pushes now. So that's it needs to go right back to the education part, and also the laws, the Broadcasting Act laws. I'm with the New Zealand Outdoors Party in New Zealand, and we've just done a really strong broadcasting changes to the Broadcasting Act that force them to have to tell both sides of the story. And that's the only way that I see the networks changing on this, is if the law insists that they show a balanced view, that there must be a right of reply to whatever you are reporting on, there must be the other side of it. That's one of the main problems to me, is that it's within the Broadcasting Act in New Zealand that they need to actually change that to enforce it and change the teaching of young journalists.
Yeah, I think, Stephen, you will admit that the quality of journos these days is not great. Once upon a time, they were taught to tell it as it is. That was my first lesson, tell it as it is. Now that they are encouraged to insert their own views and opinions into that story, and their own personality into that story. And that, all of a sudden, you don't have the story, you have a piece of propaganda. But the quality of journos is pretty average, I think. But again, though, you can't blame the journo in many cases, because if the editor at the newsroom or the station manager says you must not talk about that because it's not what our audience wants to hear, or it's not the truth, you can't blame them, can you? So how do we make the storytelling from the media more truthful, telling it as it is, if they're encouraged not to do that?
Look, I think what's happening is the free market working in real time, and people are moving away from the mainstream media, and they're moving to podcasts like this. It's happening more in America. Australia's always well behind for whatever reason, but that's what's happening. People are moving away from the mainstream media, and it's about the word that I mentioned before, authenticity. People are desperate for authenticity, and so they're not listening to the Fox News anymore. They're listening to Joe Rogan. They're listening to some of the other podcasts out there that actually have people on for long form discussions about things and try and flesh things out and try and get to the truth. And one of the things that drives me crazy, Mike, when it comes to the COVID period, is that for the people out there that refuse to take the vaccine and were honest enough to say, no, I'm not going to take it, no one has come up to them. No one has come up to Craig Kelly and said, how did you know? How did you know not to take it? How did you know to resist it? Why, Craig Kelly, did you put your whole political career on the line and sacrifice your political career for this one issue? Carl Stefanovic should have Craig Kelly on the show and say, look, mate, I was there when that interview happened. Obviously, we were in the wrong, but I'm not going to focus on that. All I want to hear is, how did you know? Who are you listening to? Where were you getting your information? And really flesh that out. That's what should be happening. That's what the media should be doing. That's what real journalism is, fleshing out the truth and getting to the bottom of things. But that's not happening. While all this is happening, while we're talking about all this stuff, while we're focusing on the politicians and the media and having these discussions, there's something that's happening silently in the background, and that is the impact that it's having on everyday lives of people right around the world and here in Australia. It was only last night at work where I heard the story about a 41-year-old who's just had a stroke from, you would assume it would be the vaccine, because 41-year-olds didn't have strokes not long ago, and suddenly now they are. So what has happened? How did we get to this position? And we're seeing the excess deaths continuing to be high. There are a lot of people out there that have suffered myocarditis or pericarditis or other health effects. A lot of people say, look, mate, I just don't feel right after I took the vaccine. They've had health impacts. Some of them are subtle and they don't talk about them. But that's the silent thing that's going on behind the scenes. And that's what the journalists should be focusing on. They should say, look, we got all the health advice from the health officials at the time. Obviously, that might not have been completely correct. Let's go and see what the actual impact is. And that's what they're not focusing on. And independent podcasters, generally like yourself, Mike and Jason, you guys are focusing on that stuff. I focus on that, on commanding the narrative. And I think there's a hunger for that information because people are out there going, look, I listened to the mainstream media during COVID. They led me down the wrong path. They haven't really shown any accountability for that. They haven't tried to backtrack on their views or try and sort where the truth really lies. They haven't done that. So let's go to places where we can find that. And look, as I said, it's happening a lot slower here in Australia, but it's definitely happening in America. That's why you've seen the mainstream basically die on the vine in America, and the rise of big name podcasters. There's so many of them now, and it's only a matter of time before it comes here. Maybe Karl Stefanovic has seen that. He's definitely got a battle with his credibility. People are questioning his motives, but I think he's got the attitude of crash or crash through, and we'll have to see how that plays out.
Jason, you will agree with me. We are in a state of war or chaos in brackets, and if you look at you and I just had not a disagreement. We had a varying opinion on the war in the Middle East, and you and I would probably differ in the what's happened in Gaza and Israel and so forth. We're allowed to do that, and we do it, I think, with respect. However, they say in war. And it is a war because there's a war with farmers. There's the chaos created because of what's happening to them and the obliteration of human rights with those in the land. And you look at the Middle East, the entire disregard for human life, and that is pervaded right around the world. They say in war, the first victim is the truth. Do you think that we are in a state in our own minds throughout the world, that we're in a state of war? That includes legacy media and independent media. And as I said before, they say the first victim of war is the truth. Do you think the truth is no longer important? And if you look at all the podcasters, I'm always quoted that I said this once, that people really don't want the truth. They want their version of that opinion, which they often call the truth, but it's not. It's an opinion that they want to hear. And so those that follow Joe Rogan, and those that follow Karl Stefanovic, and those that follow the others, they don't want the truth. They want what he is saying. And then I lead to the next thing, Jason, couple there for you, the truth. And the other one is, are we going down a path that the truth is no longer required, and that we're all becoming all of a cult status, that we are following that podcaster because that one says that that Martians are amongst us, and that one says that Donald Trump's got 10 heads, which is true, by the way, and all these things. So do you think that the truth is suffering, and do you think that people really don't want the truth anymore?
People really don't want the truth anymore. They want to get onto the bandwagon of the person who supports their bias. That's it. There is nothing more. And we can go back to Ronald Reagan when the laws changed with the media to take away as Ali explained, the presentation of both sides of an argument, letting the viewer reach their own opinion. In the phone hacking scandal, when Rupert Murdoch faced the court, he said we experimented with the idea of presenting our news from a left-wing position, and we noticed that our audience shrunk. It virtually evaporated, so we went back to the right-wing argument. And when I first heard that some 20 years ago, I thought, what? Isn't the news meant to be balanced? Well, clearly it's not. And so opinion programs come about, and shock jocks, etc., and that's where we go. So we now watch the news as if we're watching the State of Origin football game. We choose a side, whether we want the Blues or the Maroons, and we go with that way. I know it from personal experience on certain topics. When I was doing COVID ad nauseum before the TNT days, massive audience, I would change it up to go somewhere else and test things out. The audience would certainly change. And then if you said something that was against it, you would lose more of your audience. And then you would see where that audience would then go to somebody else who was peddling certain things. And when I say peddling, it becomes a level of misinformation where the bias is ad nauseum, banged on the head, bias again, bias again. And the biggest subject is, without any doubt in the world, it is whether you are pro-Israel or anti-Israel and whether the anti-Semitism seeps out or not. And that all goes back to the great Q post, dare we say it, saving Israel for last for a reason, a very specific reason not mentioned here. And you can trace it back to that post, and it has been seeping out ever since. No one wants to get down to the bottom of it, but I will say this, that when you follow the clandestines and the amuse and those guys are saying the same thing. Iran is about the nuclear dust, and if that dust determines that that uranium is uranium-1 and off US soil, then the whole world changes in that moment. And that may well be the punchline to the Iran movie there, which is the Iran war, to put that one there. But again, it comes down to a truth, whether or not you want to believe that or whether or not you want to bring your bias to the table. And I do just find it odd that we have suffered immensely, all of us in the pro COVID autonomy debate, going back to the late great Dr. Zev Zelenko, who a video is circulating on Twitter at the moment, or X as it's now called, from 2022, where he says COVID, like Marburg, Ebola, and hantavirus are all single-strand mRNAs, and they are solved with a zinc ionophore protocol, which was when you used either hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin or quercetin alongside your zinc with the vitamin D protocol, and that's what protected you against viral replication, if you can believe that. And that's the simplicity of that whole argument. It just comes back to the real basics. And I reckon that if you did have a sparring match in the heavyweight division between overweight Carl and Craig Kelly, and they got to trade blows, I reckon that'd be the best show on TV or on independent media.
I would hate to meet Craig Kelly in a grumpy mood in a dark alley. And speaking of alley, tell me about what's happening with the stories of the injured from, I think, Health Forum New Zealand and the docu-series that's out at the moment, and who funded it?
Well, it's people funded. It's called The Tribute New Zealand, and it's basically little 20-minute sections of vaccine injury stories that are just basically the person. So it's just their story rather than a lot of experts talking. They're basically testimonials. It's testimonials of what has happened to people, and yeah, it's worth looking at. So you just go the Tribute NZ if you want to take a look at that. And we're just getting those stories out where we can. I think we've filmed about 20 now, and we're about to do another session doing that. It's interesting, mainstream media not telling the stories, and I have tried so hard to get them to tell the vaccine injury stories. I think your media is actually softer over there, your mainstream media, than ours. I did note probably about 18 months ago, I did an OIA on the under 40s because I realised that so many were being diagnosed with anxiety, and I did this OIA, and your Ben Fordham of 2GB picked up my OIA on the under 40s and went and asked questions of the under 40s, the same questions I did, and he ended up with getting your New South Wales Health Minister on with him, and I thought, wow, if only I could make that happen here. And I took it to TVNZ over here and showed them Ben Fordham's thing, and what our government, when they went and questioned, when the television station went to the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Health turned around and said they'd given me the wrong figures. That was their way of getting out of letting the story go. So I think even though you guys think you've got it kind of hard, I think that our media is actually a lot harder, and producers I've spoken to over here have said that if they brought a vaccine injury story, they'd be fired, and that's not that long ago.
Isn't it incredible, again, from what I said, Jason and I talking before, that the truth is the first victim, and that's a problem, isn't it, Stephen? Because if we don't have the truth, and we talk about the good old days, but we always believed it was the truth. Now we don't really care if it's the truth. And when you talk about COVID and mortality, you're going to create an opinion very quickly. In, I suppose, most countries' cases, they refer to government as one that would look after them, and how wrong that was. Do you see I won't say humanity, I'll just say Australia and New Zealand. Do you see these two countries, and the UK, you see them replicating what happened a couple of years ago and heading down the track of lockdowns and with digital ID just about ready to gobble us up? It's not going to be a hard thing to do, and it's going to be much easier to control, isn't it?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, look, it feels like we've got fires all around us that we're trying to put out, and it really feels like we're up against it. But things are happening on the other side as well. I mean, who would have thought that One Nation would be now leading both the Liberal Party and the Labor Party in the polls? Now, as Jason said, it might not be enough to form government outright, but it's definitely in the upward trajectory. I would never have believed that, even just a year or two ago. So there's definitely things changing. I don't think any of us can predict how it's all going to play out and turn out. But all we can do is try to continue to seek the truth. I mean, I think Jason's right. I've experienced the same thing on my podcast. You attract a certain audience, but when you start talking about other things, you start to lose that audience. So there is an element of that. But you've just got to stick true to what you're trying to seek the truth. I know I'm a truth seeker. I'm happy to admit when I'm wrong. There may be positions that I have that are incorrect, and maybe I'll figure that out one day. But we should all be striving for a better country for all of us to live in, and hopefully that's what everyone is trying to do. But I feel like at the moment our elites are not focused on that, and it's the Australian people that are paying the price, whether it's the economy or immigration or a whole bunch of different things. And this shift towards censorship and digital ID is very, very concerning, and I think it all goes back to COVID. I mean, what we experienced during COVID, and Craig Kelly should have been given a platform during COVID to put out his views and his evidence, and he was shut down straight away, and he was ridiculed, and he paid the political price for that, and he deserves to, he deserves a lot more, honestly. So does Jared Rennick, so does George Christensen and Russell Broadbent and all those other heroes out there that really stood up against the draconian measures that were put before us. But the problem is there's a lot of people out there that just want to hold on to their status or their position or their job or whatever it might be, and they're not really willing to stand up for their own convictions or credibility. And I think we need to have a societal rethink about that sort of stuff and put more value into someone's convictions and credibility, and be able to disagree when we disagree. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of things that we disagree on, but I'm sure we could all talk about that respectfully, but there's not a lot of people out there that can. And that's a big problem. I think that's a big shift that we've seen in the last 10 years at least, where we've become very polarized, and it's caused a huge problem with our society. But we need to get back to trying to get back to the truth, whether it's uncomfortable or not, and because hopefully the truth steers us into the direction that we need to go, and hopefully have a brighter future, because there's a lot of, as I said, there's a lot of people hurting behind the scenes. Not everyone has a platform like this or mainstream platforms or whatever it might be. There's a lot of people hurting behind the scenes, whether it's been adverse reactions from COVID or economically. A lot of people can't pay the mortgage, can't afford cost of living, can't afford to pay the rent. Those are the stories that are not being talked about enough. And while all the political honchos and the media are having these little debates and back and forths with each other, it's really the everyday people that are paying the price.
We'll wrap this up in a text. I want to get your thoughts on, Jason, where to from here? Just look into your cup of green tea. Tell me what the green tea leaves say. I see digital ID and all the other uglies associated with that as part two of the COVID period of suppression. And I see now the digital ID, they've learnt, the governments and the elite, other corporations have learnt how to get around the dissent from many. And they are going to marshal their forces, I believe, and when they say if you don't have your digital ID, you cannot exist, similar to what they said about COVID. Don't get your injection, your jab, you are not allowed into the workforce. But by the way, it's not a compulsory requirement to get it. So where to from now? Where do you see us heading Can we learn from COVID? I mean, we know that big corporations and government they've learnt well. They learnt enough from that reconnaissance into our independence, into our liberties, into our own persona. Now they've learned how to move to the next stage. And once they get the next stage in, the rest is going to be pretty easy. If you're looking at a war of three parts, start, middle and end. The start was COVID. The middle is digital ID and all the chaos that's surrounding that, because we got heads going around in like a whirlpool. And the next bit will be you are now under our control. But the aliens aren't from Mars and Uranus. The aliens are from our government offices. What do you think?
There is no question that COVID was the trial close for the coming digital age, the digital ID, etc. Now, it is also logical that the people must see rather than be told what's going on. So I'll just give you a couple of quick stats. There were 23,000 recorded adverse COVID jab reactions reported. Out of that, 4,926 claims arose, so only 20% bothered to put in a claim. Out of that, after 2 or 3 years, only 512 of those were approved, so about 11% of the claims. So that's not very much, with a total of, so 512 out of 23,000. So less than, what's that, 1%, 0.5%, something like that. $40 million paid out, $77,000 per average claim. And there was one story from a personal injury firm that had a certain victim, got a $20,000 approval and challenged it and was awarded $1.3 million in its place. So when you get those types of stories, but they are still suppressed out there in the mainstream, it's very, very difficult. So you're not going to get the amplification of such a disaster. So we know what we've seen now, that censorship is what the government's going to rely on. But what the government hasn't been able to predict was the rise of the One Nation support to 1 in 3, which now eclipses Labor's first preference vote from the 2025 election. So that changes a lot of things. So whether or not it's going to be enough to create a real opposition, or whether it's going to be another foil for the establishment that's going to be able to think that these guys are going to get up and then they're going to knock them down real quick, smart, and that's going to be the end of it. But it's the way that these things are moving, the same as what we saw in the recent UK council elections, the same as what we're seeing in the endorsement. Trump's had 101 endorsements, all 101 were elected or got their nomination, etc. So there is a rise and a rejection of the way that the establishment works. There is a rush, and artificial intelligence is panicking many people as well, because the fear that jobs will be lost. And it's quite incredible what you can actually achieve using artificial intelligence already. And we know that we're not even at artificial general intelligence or artificial super intelligence that's certainly coming and around the corner. So what is left for us? Was COVID the great trial close for the great cull? Many people think that as well. Maybe it was. So what is going on? Why the rush to off-planet? Why the ET disclosure story in the background right now? And why the competing stories there? And why is the CIA now holding back? I mean, it is a great time to be alive. It is the slogan that I used to use in the show. What a time to be alive. How long we're going to be alive is the bigger question. But I tend to think that there is the informal rustling behind the scenes that I say provides me hope, even if I'm not part of the One Nation party as it stands today, but certainly working towards it. I can only maintain an optimism against the great horror that we see in front of us, because I can't see the point of being pessimistic, giving up and crawling back into a shell, hoping someone else is going to solve it. So I'm out here doing what I can to try and at least engage others to realise that we do have a great positive. And it's very simple. For most of us around the world, we all want to be able to contribute and leave the world a better place to our children or grandchildren or someone else's children, and at least have them outlive us. That would be what we'd all want to when we got started.
Ali, to wrap this up, first of all, Jason mentioned AI would be magnificent. I don't agree with AI at all, but for the first time in many hundreds of years, we would have intelligence in Parliament, and that would be pretty magnificent. Because at the moment, there's not a whole lot of intelligence floating around the corridors of our respective capital cities or government offices. Where do you see? And because you're a promoter and a publicist, and tour manager. I think I'll ask you one day how your liver is, because having worked in the rock industry, I know exactly what tour managers do. I'm amazed that you haven't developed a twitch, because bands do that and artists do that to tour managers, speaking from experience. Where do you see, though, the future of New Zealand, Australia, humanity for that matter? Do you think COVID was Mark 1, Mark 2 is digital ID, Mark 3 will be all the other things they haven't included into the first phase and the second phase, and that once you get past digital ID and digital, we're stuffed?
Well, I've been in this game for a long time, so I was very suspicious of vaccines when my children were born 30 years ago, so I've been following the shenanigans of Bill Gates for a very, very long time. So right now, for me, there's more people awake than there were back then. So I hope that through podcasts like this, through changes that we can make in media and communications, that more and more people will wake up, because their biggest enemy is actually us. And if enough people wake up and say, no, I'm not going to do that. And I look at England, where they brought in the mandate over in the UK for the doctors and nurses, and they just went, no, we'll walk out of your hospital. We're not doing the vaccine. And they dropped the mandate for them because they all stood together like glue. We need that on a global basis. We need lots of people to wake up. And the more people that wake up, the more chance we've got of standing up, because their greatest enemy is the power of the people.
And Stephen, tell me your thoughts on, you have to look into your, do you drink coffee or tea? Look into it. Tell me what you see. Are we doomed, or is it just a malfunction of my brain?
You are so pessimistic. Every time I come on, you're always talking about this doom and gloom that's
It's
going
not a
on.
light at the tunnel, it's a bloody brain.
We're all dead, according to Mike Ryan. Look, mate, I'm far more pessimistic, but we definitely need to hurry up. And I think Ali's correct. The masses, or the elites, do fear the masses. I mean, and that's because the power is with the people. And we definitely need a revolution of thinking in this country, and probably other countries like New Zealand and the UK as well. The group that I'm part of, Australians for Better Government, we put out a press release today calling for citizens-initiated veto. So that was something that was put forward by John Ruddick, of all people, from the Libertarian Party, when he spoke at one of our events. And what it is a mechanism similar to citizens-initiated referendum, where if you get enough of a groundswell of support from the everyday people to repeal legislation, then there's an avenue for that to happen. So if the people push back, say for example a digital ID is passed, and enough people say no, we don't want that, we never asked for that, it was never taken to an election, that's when citizens initiated veto would kick into place, and it would go to a public plebiscite, and the people would have the option to repeal that legislation or not. We talked about that because we've seen so many broken promises in government at the moment, for many years, and only recently Albanese and Jim Chalmers were out there so often saying, we're not going to touch capital gains and we're not going to touch negative gearing. Or what have they done? They've gone and meddled with it, and they haven't taken it to an election. The Australian people never asked for it, they never agreed to it, but they've done it anyway. So that's where citizens initiated veto would come into play. Now we need to start having discussions about that sort of stuff. No system is perfect. That's why we call it Australians for Better Government. We don't call Australians for perfect government, because you're dealing with human nature, but we need safeguards against human nature, and we need to do a lot more in that space. I mean, I'm completely shocked and horrified by the fact that Ralph Babet introduced a bill into Parliament to call for a referendum for free speech, and the other senators voted against it, voted it down. They were against it. Like, how could you possibly be against putting forward a referendum where you ask the Australian people whether they want to enshrine free speech in the Constitution? The politicians should say, yes, let's give the people of Australia a choice, and let's hear what their view is. So we need to, as I said, we need a revolution of thinking in this country, and we need to start thinking, we need to start getting ahead of the politicians. We can't rely on the politicians anymore. There's no one coming to save us, We relied on that in the past, but I don't think it's going to happen this time. It's up to the Australian people to save themselves, and we need groups like Australians for Better Government. We can't solve all the problems, but there needs to be other groups out there proposing ideas on how we can safeguard against the politicians and protect our freedoms and protect our individual sovereignty, and really look for the direction that we want to take the country in. And as I said, we can't rely on the politicians to do that. We need to look within ourselves. And there's a lot of great thinkers out there. There's a lot of great ideas. I mean, a lot of the ideas are already there in plain sight. We just need to adopt them and carry them forward.
Yeah, you think I'm negative? Wait till I get Havori Morridge on with you. He and I, we'll send you the razor blades prior. Now, Jason,
you just need a big hug, Mike. That's all you need.
No, I need a whiskey. I'm not allowed to have one tonight. Nothing between Monday and Friday. Isn't that a disgraceful state of affairs?
It's un-Australian.
Yeah, it is. Do you tell my wife? I'll give you her number. You call her and tell her it's not Australian.
Yes.
Jason, if somebody wants to find out more about you and your forthcoming book and all sorts of things about your podcast and what you're doing, how do they do that?
Channel51.com.au will take you to my Substack page. So there are those that won't want to engage because they might have to put their face on the screen or something like that. You can go to my X at JasonQCitizen1, or you can find me on Facebook, Jason Olby1, Olborn, and that Olby1 is in there simply because of the Facebook censorship ban. I had to come up with a new identity, and you'll find me under that one.
And you need to wear a mask. Oh. Back to COVID.
Never.
And Ali Cook, tell us how they can find out more about you and all the juicy...
Oh, well, there's a number of ways. If you wanted to find out what I'm doing on a political front, that's nzofp.co.nz. If you want to find me on X, I'm at Kiwi Ali. That's ALY. And if you want to find me musically, I'm alicook.com.au.
Fantastic. And Stephen, how would they find out more about you, about your award-winning Emmy podcast? He keeps telling me it's the best in the world.
Yeah. Well, I would encourage people first to go to australiansforbetter.com and read that press release that we put out today about citizens-initiated veto. Start, and as I said, revolution of thinking. Let's start looking at ideas like that. They might be right, they might be wrong, but it's up to the Australian people to decide. But if you want to follow everything that I'm doing, it is by heading to commandingthenarrative.com, and it is so successful in Mike's opinion because I've had Mike on the show before. I've had Jason on the show. I suspect I should have Jason on very, very soon, and we have some great guests as well. So please head to Commanding.
And Ali too, don't forget Ali.
Well, I haven't had Ali on yet, but I think that might be a future interview as well. I need to get Ali's contact.
And what I'll do, Stephen, I'm going to send you a photo of that train coming towards me. Make sure it's the right picture, otherwise I may get locked up.
Next time I'm on, I want to see flowers behind you on the screen. I don't want to see like death and destruction. Like nice flowery fields or sunshine. Big smiley face.
Good on you, mate. I love you too. I've got to thank Ali Cook, Jason Olborn, and better thank Stephen Tripp. Thank you for being part of the Protagonists. We're talking about a fairly dicey subject. I think it's about the media, which we're all involved in some way. A little bit, we're like the French Resistance at the moment, but we're doing our bit trying to add a little bit of a goodness to the world. And in my case, a little bit less death and destruction, and make that train stop just to make Stephen happier. Thank you so much for being part of the panel. Thank you to our audience, and thank you to everybody. So thank you. See, there you are. Big hug there for Stephen. This is The Protagonists, and this has been The World Today.